Hello, dear gentle marketers. Welcome to episode 31 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm. As always, I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you are an entrepreneur who is tired of the traditional marketing model and are ready for a paradigm shift. You might also be a marketing impact pioneer, someone who's working in an organization, so not an entrepreneur, but in an organization who does business for good. Real quick before we begin, if you want to be informed about the extra episodes that I'm posting right now over the coming weeks in response to the pandemic, please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app. I'm not sharing those episodes on social media or on my website. But today's a regular episode, as every Friday, that I recorded at the end of last year. And it falls under the P of promotion of the Gentle Marketing Mandala. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download your one-page marketing plan in the shape of a mandala that comes with 7 days of email prompts to fill out your 7 Ps. You can download that at sarahsantacroce.com/1 page. sarahsantacroce.com/1 page. Now, even though this episode was recorded quite a while ago, I think it really fits in today's circumstances, kind of similar to the last episode about paying from the heart with Mark Silver. Because besides talking about using referrals for our promotion, which is my guest's expertise, in the second half of the podcast, we also talk about John's new book, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, 366 Daily Meditations to Feed Your Soul and Grow Your Business. At the time of recording in December 2019, I didn't have my copy yet of this book, but of course by now it has arrived and it's sitting on my bedside table, so I can always look up the daily meditation and prompt to reflect upon before going to sleep. In a moment, I'll read you today's reflection and prompts, but first, here's some more information about my guest today, John Jantsch. So John is a marketing consultant, speaker, and author of Duct Tape Marketing, Duct Tape Selling, The Commitment Engine, SEO for Growth, and the Referral Engine, and the founder of the Duct Tape Marketing Consultant Network. His latest book, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, 366 Daily Meditations to Feed Your Soul and Grow Your Business, is a daily reminder to entrepreneurs that the better you makes a better business. So let me read you today's reflection. Today's April 7th, and so I opened the book on April 7th because that's how it's organized. There's literally a daily meditation and reflection. So the title of today's reflection is In One Word. The cure for all the ills and wrongs, the cares, the sorrows, and crimes of humanity all lie in that one word, love. It is the divine vitality that produces and restores life. To each and every one of us, it gives the power of working miracles if we will. Lydia Maria Child, Letters from New York, 1843. So that's kind of the prompt, and then he reflects upon that text, and it goes like this. How does one define the word love? And the greater challenge, is it even appropriate to use in the context of business? If indeed the cure for all or even some ills and wrongs is the goal of your journey, then perhaps expanding your relationship with the word love does make sense. Not in the romantic sense, but in the humanity sense. Do you know what makes you take risks? What creates connection? What inspires? These are all ideas that help entrepreneurial ventures soar, and they're all based on some sort of love. Love takes courage. Love takes wisdom. Love takes honesty. Love takes loyalty. Love takes ... Maybe it does have a place in business. And then the challenge question: what attribute of love is missing from your mission? So that's today's reflection, April 7th. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to John. So here's John and I, and this again is recorded in December 2019. Hi, John. How are you?
I am great, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. It's such a pleasure. I've been following you for years and years in Duct Tape Marketing, Referral Engine. So many good books for someone who's just starting out. And as I just said offline, I feel like there's a return to basics, or a return to the human connection, and therefore a return to, getting referrals, one of the best marketing techniques out there, right? Do you
Yeah,
feel the same thing?
it's always been important to get people to talk about you and share your business. But I think you're right. A lot of these digital tools that were kind of new things, new toys almost, if you will, really had people kind of scattering into, look at all these things we can do now, and it's free, and it's mass. And I think what happened is we as consumers, buyers, have said, wait a minute, I don't want that. And so you're absolutely right. A return to a much more personal, human approach. It never really went out of style, but I think people are realizing, yes, that is what we have to do, because that's what buyers want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it feels, and I just mentioned Mark Schaefer's book, Marketing Rebellion. He so beautifully says that the new generation, millennials, for example, well, they don't want to be marketed to. So they don't want to receive all these ads. They're finding all creative ways to block them out.
Right.
And so eventually there has to be a return to the human connection, or the referral marketing. And it's funny because you said in the before we recorded, you said, well, it's harder. That stuff is harder than just paying for ads, right? So
Yeah, and I'm not so sure it's harder necessarily. It takes more intention. It
yeah,
takes, it takes being more human, which
yeah.
a lot of this technology has taught us not to be.
That's so true. In the book, you so beautifully explain why people actually make referrals. Could you explain that to our listeners?
Well, my belief is that we're wired to do that. We want to do that. I mean, if you think back to when we were in, cave days, we had to make referrals in order to survive. I mean, you had to know where the water was, you had to know where the danger was. People had to, talk about what was good and bad about, everything that was going on in life. And so I think that we're sort of naturally wired to do that. And it's really easy to use kind of your own existence as a test for this. I mean, how often have you or your listeners had a great experience, and you talk about it? You want to tell your friends about this company that exceeded your expectations or surprised you in some fashion. And unfortunately, that's for good or bad. I mean, because if they let you down, we talk about it today as well. And while a lot of marketers are realizing we have to treat our buyers as humans, we also have to blend that with the fact that they want to use some of this technology as well. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, reviews, and how many of us have gone on a website and total strangers have written good things about this business, so we go ahead and buy from that business, or stay at that hotel, or eat at that restaurant. And I think that's the hard part for a lot of people. It's not just human versus machine. It is, how do we blend these technologies in a way that meets the behavior that the buyer, the customer, the consumer wants today.
Yeah, we're not wanting to throw all the technology away. We want to be able to use it, but in a more human context.
That's
That's
right.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we get good referrals? I think the art of getting a good referral is still worth mentioning here, even though it seems like, yeah, like you said, that's been around for a long time. But I still think today a lot of entrepreneurs are actually struggling with getting referrals, and they don't make it also a priority for their business. So how do we get these referrals on an ongoing basis?
You bet. So, I mean, that I spend probably the first half of my book, The Referral Engine, talking about not tactics for getting more referrals, but tactics for being more referable, because that's step
Right.
number one. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what we talk about, what tricks, what tactics we use, we're not going to get more referrals necessarily unless people are happy.
Right.
So I think the first step is recognizing that marketing doesn't end when somebody says, "Okay, I'm going to buy from you." It ends in a lot of ways. It never ends actually, but it ends in a lot of ways when somebody gets a result. So we have to think in terms of, okay, that person said they want to buy. How do we now keep that experience amazing? How do we make sure that we're communicating fully? How do we make sure that they are getting the result that we promised? We have to actually think about all these stages of the customer journey that people talk about as I use 7 stages for our customer journey, and the middle part is when somebody buys. So it's know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And we have to think about our marketing tactics, our processes, our service, everything that we do as really getting to that ultimate point where somebody's so happy with what the result they got and the experience that they had, that they will willingly go tell their friends and neighbors. And so, that's the first step. But then we also have to kind of nudge that a little. We have to amplify our referability. A lot of times you'll read reviews and, this company's got just glowing reviews. Everybody loves them, but they're not going back and saying, okay, what would be a logical way to help people talk about us, to maybe take our referral champions and do something special, for them, so that they realize, hey, yeah, this is something that I want to do. This is something this company appreciates. And so you have to be referable. You have to think about processes and campaigns and tactics that are going to make sure that people have a great experience, and realize that that's part of your marketing. But then you have to go back there and do something to stay top of mind, to ask for referrals, to make it easy for people to refer you. That's how companies that are doing a great job then actually turn that into a marketing machine.
Mm. Yeah, I love this so much because it reminds me of a lot of what we are doing on the Gentle Marketing Revolution program is this dance between being and doing.
Yeah.
So you have to be this entrepreneur that people are, we have similar worldviews, we share the same values, so they're attracted to you as the entrepreneur for being a certain way. And of course, there's the doing, so meaning you have your skills, but then from the entrepreneur's perspective, there's also what you're doing to get more referrals. So again, there's always this dance between the being and the doing. It's not just, oh, I'm just going to sit back and wait for all these referrals. No, I'm actually proactively doing something to get more as well.
Yeah, and that's a part that I don't get pushback necessarily, but that's the part where people go, oh, I don't know. If I do good work, won't people just talk about me? I don't want to go ask for referrals. And I think where you have to get is a mindset that if what you do, your product, your service, what you do actually brings value to the people that you do it for, then you're actually kind of doing your customers a disservice by not helping them bring that value, that result, to friends, neighbors, and colleagues. And I think that's the point of view or the posture that I think you have to take, where you really, if you're very, very convinced in the value that you bring, you'll have no problem helping people bring that value to their friends, neighbors, and colleagues.
Yeah, and I love how you, in the book, I think you mentioned that there's a right time also to ask for these referrals. So I think it can come over as just a very natural progression of your relationship, and it doesn't feel like salesy or anything like that.
Yeah.
So if they're sending you an email thanking you for the service you've provided, then that's a great time to follow up with that.
Yeah, those moments of truth, you have to be looking for. But I tell you what, where I see a lot of people get results is when they also think in terms of referrals as an intention. So in other words, a lot of times people will get a client, they'll deliver the result, they'll go back and go, hey, know anybody else who needs what we do? But what if you started thinking in terms of, this client's going to be so happy that they're going to want to give you referrals. So let's plant the seed, even in the sales process, really early on. Let's start talking about it. Here's what we promised today. And we know you're going to be so thrilled that at the end of 90 days, we're going to come back and we're going to make sure you're thrilled. And then we're going to allow you to introduce some other folks to who need that result. Something of that nature, whatever you're comfortable with in terms of delivering that message. But what I've found is that companies that do that get a lot more referrals because, first off, it's kind of part of the deal. I mean, they've kind of agreed to it, but
Right.
also you're promising them that they are going to be so thrilled they're going to want to refer you. It's such a powerful message.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good sales message, right? Because
Exactly.
you yeah.
Exactly. It's like we're so convinced you're going to be thrilled
Yeah.
that we have no doubt that you're going to want to refer us. So obviously there are better ways to say that, depending upon your business, your industry, your comfort level. But introducing that idea is certainly a pretty potent way to amplify your referability.
And I like the commitment that it takes also from the business owner then to actually live up to that promise that you just made, right? So
Yeah. We actually,
powerful.
so I mentioned that process of those stages. It's something we call the marketing hourglass. And so that's the know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. And so we work with a lot of businesses that we use that framework to actually kind of say, okay, what would we have to do to get people to know us, to like us, to trust us? And we kind of fill in the boxes.
Right.
But a lot of times what I'll do is say, okay, let's flip this thing around. Let's start with, what would we have to do, 60, 90 days after the sale so that 100% of our customers are giving us referrals.
Right.
Because we tend to start with how do we get the click? How do we get the phone call? That kind of stuff. But what if we built it backwards? And so we were initially focused almost exclusively on the experience that a customer had. And then we eventually get back to, okay, how do we get them to pick up the phone and call us? It does actually raise the bar. I mean, I've challenged people a lot of times and say, okay, what would it take in your business? What would you have to do differently in your business if the goal was to get 100% referral? So in other words, 100% of your customers will refer somebody to you. What would you have to change or do or add in order to get that to happen? And it a lot of times it really raises the bar to a point where somebody said, well, we'll have to improve our product, we'll have to improve our service, we'll have to give this, we'll have to do that, follow up, and all of a sudden, they've improved their business just by that thinking.
Yeah. I love this story that you tell at the beginning of the book about the goddess note in your wife's coat. So your wife got a new coat, and then you were out and about, and she puts her hand in her pocket, and there was this note that just said, "You're a goddess," right? And so you had to look it up, and it was basically was it the manufacturer that put that in, or the
Yes, it was, and it was fitting with their brand. I mean, it was I can't remember exactly, but it was definitely a very earth friendly clothing
yeah
company
yeah
that probably had a spiritual kind of bent to some of
exactly
their
yeah
messaging, and
yeah
so it was right on brand. But it was also just she pulled it out and she thought, well, that's fun, and I think
yeah.
that's those little things. Somebody had an idea, to do that maybe, or who knows? I mean, maybe somebody just started doing it, but those little things, once they're put in place, can have such tremendous impact. And so it's really, it's just a matter of thinking, how could we up our game? How could we surprise people? How could we exceed people's expectations? And you just start, the accumulation of little things like that is really how you create a brand that people do want to talk about.
Yeah, and what I love about this story is that it uses joy as a marketing currency. It starts a story because, I don't know how many podcasts you've been on where you told that story and it's in your book. And so obviously that's not going to happen maybe with every story that you're using. But it's the idea of using joy and making like this idea of feel good marketing is so important to me because a lot of times we use the opposite, right? The let's talk about your pain and let's
Yeah.
manipulate you into buying, where it was such a positive story, such a beautiful story that used joy as a marketing currency. Do you have any other clients of yours that have implemented something similar?
I'm sure I do. Um, I mean, it probably nothing that parallels that exactly, but we always try to do that with. I'll give you an example. I have a remodeling contractor we've worked with for years, And after a project is done, they do a walkthrough at delivery, and then they come back 90 days later and do another, make sure everything's great. And at that visit, they have taken photos the entire time,
Uh-huh.
during demolition, during putting stuff in. They have it professionally shot. After the fact, they use for their own marketing purposes, of course. But they then get a book made, hardback, bound, kind of coffee table ish
Right.
book made of the project, and they give that as a gift. And it's amazing how much response they get to that idea, because people, I think I may have even written about this in the Referral Engine. I can't remember, but people love having that kind of documentation. Maybe they've done some themselves, but here's this kind of cool documentation of their big remodeling project. But it also obviously acts as a lot of times people come over, they want to see the new remodel, at their friend's house. And now they have this kind of historical record, that kind of showcases the remodeler and what they care about. So it acts as a nice kind of surprise gift, but it does actually generate some referrals.
I love that. Yeah. And there's again an emotional attachment, right? Because if you're remodeling, well, usually there's a lot of emotions and maybe a few fights with the,
Oh,
with
sure.
the
Yeah,
spouse
yeah.
and
No,
things like
it's
that. So
you're going to come into somebody's house and wreck their routine and make them live in
yeah.
the basement for 6 weeks. I mean, so there's
Yeah.
no question there is an emotional component to
Yeah.
that process. So, but ultimately, in most cases, particularly with this company, because they do such great work, in the end, they're thrilled with the result they got, and so
Yeah.
you help reinforce that.
That's great. That's a great example. Well, now you've just actually published a new book called The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. So I'm going to take the remaining time to talk about that. It's a collection of 366 daily lessons based on the text of the Transcendentalists.
Yeah,
You know that I'm in Europe, so I had to be honest, I actually had to look it up,
yeah.
as I
It's
don't
a,
think
it's a
we
very
studied
American.
them in history class
Yeah,
over here in
yeah.
Europe.
It's a very American, concept, because that's certainly a label that was applied to some American, thinkers, scholars, writers in the mid 19th century. And I suspect even in Europe, there were some texts of some of those writers that were, the Scarlet Letter and some of Emerson's stuff. And I'm sure Thoreau, Walden, is
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
a classic that is read by high school and college students. So, but yeah, diving deep into the vein of literature probably will unearth for you some new folks.
Yeah, and so what they believed in is really that kind of like organized religion and political parties corrupt the purity of the individual, and so I guess is that where the self-reliant and kind of independent term came from?
Yeah, so if you think about what was going on in America at the time, we were on the cusp of a civil war.
Hmm.
Women were still trying to march in the streets to get the right to vote. We were trying to abolish slavery. It was a very upheaval time, and it was probably the first kind of counterculture, period in American history. And so the writers at the time were really some of the first starting to, and not just the writers. I mean, Emerson was a preacher. It was with the people, were saying, hey, you got to think for yourself. We're all endowed with, a soul. And because of that, we need to make choices that are right for us and not just follow, the well-worn path that we're told to follow.
Hmm.
And so, some of it was in response to, this reform and this upheaval that was going on. But as I dug in deeper into the literature, I found even the fiction writers in some of the novels like The Scarlet Letter and Moby Dick. It was the first time that the protagonists in a lot of those characters, kind of mirrored what was going on at that time. And so you had a lot of protagonists that were very, I've got to think for myself. It might cost me more to follow my heart, but I'm going to do it. And to me, I think that that's still today, 150 years later, some of the best entrepreneurial writing or advice for entrepreneurs. And so I dug into that, and every day starts with some reading or text from one of those works. And as I said, people will be familiar with some of them. I certainly unearthed a lot of letters and journals, that these folks wrote back and forth to each other as well. That will be very new to a lot of people. There were a lot of women authors at the time who, even though they were quite prolific, a lot of their writing didn't really surface until maybe even Margaret Fuller's writing. Probably the first true feminist, I suppose, voice in America. Her writing was kind of buried for many years, and is kind of seeing a resurgence. And so I think a lot of people, we were talking about this idea of being more human. I think a lot of people are going back and saying, the stuff that these folks wrote in, the 1850s, 1860s is so completely relevant, maybe perhaps almost more relevant,
Than
today.
What's been written now.
Yeah, than what's written now. And so I wanted to anchor the book in that. And then I have owned my own business for 30 years. So I basically give, some context or relevance based on my experience every day. And then I leave you with a challenge question. And I'm hearing from people that the challenge question is, the part that really kind of anchors the day for them. And so this is not a book that you pick up and go, oh, got a long weekend, or I'm going to go, on vacation and read through this book. This book is, almost like a daily practice is what it's meant to be, that you read something, hopefully it touches you somehow, has some impact, gets you thinking about, hopefully, some change that you might want to make, some way that you want to look at things differently, to really kind of help you keep evolving. As entrepreneurs, we go out, a lot of times we're making up stuff from nothing. We had an idea, we're starting a business, and we're starting to grow and learn and serve people. The world comes at you 100 miles an hour. And so, I think that it's become very practical and reasonable, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs to have kind of a morning, ritual or routine where they will do some reading, some meditation, some journaling, and which were all practices that Thoreau particularly was a big fan of. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs have kind of found that rhythm to help kind of center them for the day, get them thinking about the things that are important, thinking about the things that are right in front of them instead of past and future. And that, I think that kind of grounds and centers you. So at least for me, the idea was to write a book that maybe somebody jumped in for 2 minutes every morning, as maybe part of some established routine.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And what comes to mind is also, again, this balance between being and doing. Yes. And to me, it feels like your previous books have been more about the doing, it's like techniques and frameworks. And so it's beautiful to see you how you have evolved with over 30 years of business, and now you're also writing a book about the being. And I think you're so right. As entrepreneurs, in a way, I think I've heard this quote once, where we're being paid for our own personal development, to go through our own personal development, right? Because if you're in a corporate job, you don't really have so much a space or time to reflect on who you are and what you really want, and what's your definition of success, and all these really important questions that as entrepreneurs we tend to have more time to focus on them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, but I will say that I think a lot of organizations, corporations, whatever you want to call them, I think are realizing and waking up to this idea that that a better individual makes a better contributor to the organization. So I do see a lot of organizations that are putting a whole lot of emphasis on this idea of personal development. But you're so right. As entrepreneurs, we're kind of in charge of that for ourselves. And I do think we probably all know how to do everything we need to do. And so it really I wanted to write this book to be more about what we need to work on is the mindset to make sure that we're doing it, instead of, checking Facebook and, doing all the stuff that can take up all of our time. Are we focused on bringing our unique gift to the world to have the greatest impact possible? And that's this book, instead of being a how-to book, I like to call it a why-to book.
A Y2 book. I love that. Yeah. So I, as you know, I'm in Europe, and so I haven't actually received your book yet. We're recording this before Christmas, so I have my fingers crossed that it arrives before Christmas. But I've listened to enough other podcasts where I know how it's structured, and I heard you talk about it, and so I thought it'd be beautiful if you picked a day of the theme. And you told me that it was September, that talks about congruence, because
Yeah.
congruence is kind of a big topic for my podcast and my program, where we talk a lot about having to, or feeling like we have to do marketing in a certain way that we see other people do it. And so we kind of start wearing this marketing mask for our own business and apply whatever everybody else is doing. And eventually, and that's exactly what happened to me, eventually waking up and saying, oh my God, I'm not feeling whole again anymore. What am I really doing? Who am I? So I think this topic of congruence would be really great if you picked maybe one day in September that you could read aloud and
You bet.
comment on it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, it's so easy to get knocked out of congruence because again, we're wading into things we don't know, we've never done before. We're trying to figure it out, and so a lot of times we do exactly that. We go and see what everybody else is doing. Oh, they're running Facebook ads that talk about this and have have an expiration time, and you get a special deal, and it, ultimately when we step back and look at it, we go, that's kind of icky. That's not really me. That's not the message I want to put out there in the world. I'm not proud of that work. And I'm not casting blame. I mean, it's so easy to do because of the nature of what it is that we do. And so having your core values, almost using them as a way to say, okay, does this check the boxes? Okay, yes, we can do it. I think, sometimes it's just gut feeling, but a lot of times because of the swirl of, everyday entrepreneurship and, the rat race of, trying to figure it out, a lot of times we have to take time to remind ourselves that, is this on brand? Is this me? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so true.
today's reading, you told me to pick one or asked me to pick one from September because the theme of that month is congruence. So every day starts with a title, then a reading from some literature that I chose, and then 100, 200 words from me, and then a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked September 14th. The title is Entirely Happy. I was something that lay under the sun and felt it, like the pumpkins, and I did not want to be anything more. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we feel like that when we die and become a part of something entire, whether it is sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. When it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. That's from American author Willa Cather's book, My Antonia, which was written in 1918. Happiness, that's what we all want, isn't it? But to have a goal, any goal, to achieve a goal, much less such an ambitious one like achieving happiness, you must first possess the ability to describe what a win looks like. Or is the search for happiness such an elusive one because we have no final destination in mind? We remain hopelessly lost in our journey, but at least we're making good time. Let's borrow Cather's description as a great starting point. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. There's nothing scientific or even terribly philosophical about Cather's description. It is at once melodic, perpetual, and filled with life. It's fitting that this is the quote inscribed on Cather's gravestone as well. So could you live with that? Would that be enough to be dissolved into something complete and great? So your challenge question, what do you think happiness feels like? Can you describe it?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
Happiness, I think what it brings up is so many other things when it comes to business, right? Because what I just wrote about is the definition of success, and how if we're not clear with how we define success, which I guess could be replaced by happiness,
Yeah.
then we're kind of being fed this mainstream of how everybody else defines happiness or success. And so if we're not clear with what it means for us, we could live our whole life striving for someone else's definition of happiness, I guess.
And many do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've actually of late been kind of, I this book in a lot of ways was a journey for me, of course, and I continue the journey. I'm starting a community of folks who want to discuss these themes starting in the beginning of 2020, and so I've been continuing to write about these ideas. And one of the ideas that I'm wrestling with still is there a difference between joy and happiness? Does our chasing happiness actually rob us of our joy?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that a lot of people, because of the way we've defined happiness or what will bring us happiness, we sometimes kind of sacrifice being joyful in the moment, whatever we're doing or wherever we're going. And I think that's a concept that's I'm still wrestling with.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what comes out of that, because it's so true. It's these two terms that we just kind of throw around as being the same, but maybe they are not the same. Personally, I can't wait for my book to arrive and really make sure that this is part of my daily routine. I have a gratitude routine that I usually do at night, and then a meditation routine that I do in the morning, and I can see myself, definitely going through one page of the book the minute I get to my office and say, okay, let me look at John's text. So looking forward to that.
Well, I hope that's how people find it to be useful. One of the things I've found is that even if I ask that question and I don't immediately, although the book is set up so that you've got a couple lines, if you're one of those people that wants to highlight and jot notes, you can in the book. But I find that the question kind of stays with you, and then there'll be points throughout the day where something will happen and I'll go, oh, that's kind of how I react to that, or that's kind of how I do that. And I think any growth that we're going to have, requires kind of that first witnessing, how it shows up, or how some good or bad habit or thing that we call good or bad shows up, because a lot of times we do things just habitually and don't even think about them. So having some space to maybe kind of think about and maybe even set intentions, for what you want to do for the day, I think is a great practice.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily have to be, a lot of writing if that's not your thing. I think the subconscious mind sometimes brings you the answers just because you read that text, and then it's somewhere sitting there in the back of your brain.
Yeah. That's I think that's the way our brains work.
Yeah. This has been so beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me and discuss these questions, John. I'm super grateful for our time together.
My pleasure. And I'll send you a digital copy if you want to get started, so that you don't have to wait for the hard copy. Although this is a book that I think really is better.
I think it'll be so much better
in hard copy. Although they're depending upon when people are listening to this, sometime in January, the audiobook will come out as well. So if you liked my reading today, you can hear 366 of those.
Yeah, that's a good one too, to have just a small audio every day. So
I listen to some guided meditations myself in the mornings, and I think that there are a lot of people that are kind of in that habit of listening to a little something and then reflecting on it.
Yeah. So we want to just make sure that we say the title again, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, and you can find that on Amazon. I'm sure by the time this airs, it will also be available in Europe, because you said in the UK it's already shipped.
Yeah, it is. People are receiving it there, so I'm sure that it'll be wherever you buy books, you'll be able to get it at some point soon.
Wonderful. And then previously,
if you want to find out, I was going to say, if you want to find out a little more in the meantime, you can just go to self-reliantentrepreneur.com, or anything that I've been doing the last 30 years, you can find at ducttapemarketing.com as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. And the previous book we talked about was the Referral Engine. So you can find that as well.
That's right.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. This has been an absolute pleasure. I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. And I also hope that you'll join me on this journey to a kinder marketing paradigm. Now, more than ever, do we need more love and empathy and gentleness in business. Please invite your friends to join us by sharing this podcast or the Gentle Business Manifesto with them. Both can be found at thegentlebusinessrevolution.com. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. See you next time.